flown with me and you've seen it written down. It's talking about the check-in and how we do it. We know how a formation checks in. So Vixen formation, the leader will just say Vixen. Technically speaking, number 2 is supposed to say Vixen 2, then 3 goes 3 and 4 goes 4. When you get a bit sharp and punchy, it becomes Vixen 2, 3, 4. You've got to know what you're doing to do that, but that's acceptable. That's what guys do on the line or when they're actually on the squadron. So we all know that already, but what I'm going to talk about is how we check the formation in as we start the airplanes up and get ready to go. So we're lined up here. Can you guys see the numbers? It's quite difficult with the lighting. 4, 2, 3, and 1. That's how it lines up. So we've all got our names on the jets. But in reality, you might have your name on the jet. You might not fly your jet that day. You just get given what the duty authorizer gives you, particularly if number 1 here needs a laser pod and number 3 here needs LGBs. But that's normally number 1's jet. Tough shit, mate. You fly the jet that you've got given for the mission. So they won't be in an order 1, 2, 3, 4 necessarily. So one of the things you need to know is where everybody is for the check-in. A good way to do that is when you nominate a check-in for a check-in time, and I recommend you do that on server time. Don't say on UK time at 9:31, we will check in, because the server and the clock in your jet will be a different time. So what you need to do is try and work out what the server time is going to be if you start the server. Or alternatively, you can say, well, I will check you in when you're ready. And some of you guys have seen this, the signal that you are ready. So number 3, he's pretty sharp. He's got himself started up. He just dismisses his ground crew and he does that. Yeah, he does that. He does that, and he goes, brilliant. Vixen check, 2, 3, 4. Vixen, stud 1, go. That signal moving forward means I'm ready. Check me in any time you like. If you've not got a time attached to your check-in, you can still do it if you've got a time attached to your check-in, because it means you can send your ground crew off so they can go off and have tea and Jaffa cakes. If you're in a Has, quite similar. 1 and 2 in this instance, of course. 1 and 2 just going off as a pair. Let's just say you both come out when you're ready. Just come on out. You can see they're ready and check in, and off you go. So there shouldn't be anything too new there. I hope you should all be fairly familiar with that. The other thing that needs to be briefed and doesn't tend to get done, and we need to have an SOP for it, is collector frequency. So I've talked to some people about what a collector frequency is. A collector frequency is a frequency where you can collect everyone, and it will be briefed. Often you'll have it as a standard. So often, if Vixen will go off, if a squadron has got 3 call signs that they use, let's just say it's Vixen, Baldric, and Cobra. Each formation will have a different call sign that goes with it, and each formation call sign has a frequency that goes with it that's allocated to the squadron and to the guys. They'll also have generally a VHF frequency or an alternative frequency. That is often the one used as a collector. The problem we've got on these airplanes in DCS, you can't get to guard using the TR plus G function, which is kind of listening out on guard. So what I'm going to suggest now is that for us to have a collector frequency that's always guard, which is 2430 or 121.5. You'll find it on things like your Harrier as E, and I assume the Hornet is much the same on the upfront controller. So what we do is, if we have an SOP that you wouldn't really do this because you're just messing around on guard, but let's just do it for now. You have a collector frequency as guard. So if you try to check in number 2 and you can't find him, you're in the air now, for example. If you can't find number 2, go to E on your other radio, whichever one, doesn't matter, it's your cockpit, and check him in there. And 2, if you've not heard from number 1, go, I bet he's trying to talk to me right now. Go to E, and that's how you find each other. It's fine when you're on the ground because you know it might be on stud 1 or stud 7 or stud 9, whatever discrete frequency. But when you're on the way to the range, talking to a tanker, going to where the hell is he? What frequency? I've lost him. So that's why we use a collector frequency. And if the shit hits the fan and you can't find him, and we'll use E guard 2430 or 1215. Guys, all happy with that so far? Still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you do that, yep. Go on.
Just one thing. I think that the Harrier does have the plus guard frequency.
It has it on the radio, but I don't know if it works.
It does, because the Tomcats, I've heard them transmitting on guard by accident.
Okay, yeah, but so what we need to do is a comprehensive test where, for example, a couple of Harriers gets airborne, puts his radio in TR plus G, and the Tomcat, I've seen it there on the ANARC, whatever it's called, plus G, and then someone transmitting on guard and see if it comes through. Come back with a definitive answer, and then we'll, for all of the aircraft, though, that's the problem. We need to make sure they all do it.
I've noticed as well that the SRS overlay colours itself red when it receives a guard transmission rather than white.
That's interesting. I've not noticed that before. So let's work on guard for the moment. But if we know that all works, then guard becomes almost like a second collector. Not officially, that's not the phrase for it, but it means it's not even on the bloody collector frequency. Right, I'll go to guard. Will be the ridicule of the entire nation because everyone can hear you when you talk on guard. So let's have a look at it. Let's use guard initially, and then when eventually the guys get used to it, we'll work out to make sure we do have a collector frequency, because we need to consolidate stud cards as well, I'm sure, to find out what's what. But each formation should be briefing a collector frequency. But that's interesting. I didn't know guard did that in DCS. It didn't used to.
A question or potential suggestion.
Go on.
I don't know if you already got this, but if we haven't, can we have that on a knee board somewhere? So, you know, as we only fly kind of once a week, unlike real pilots.
You're fading out.
We've got a reference point.
Sorry, mate, you faded out. I didn't get the end of it.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if we don't already have this, can we have this in a knee board so we can easily find it and refer to it if we've forgotten?
No, it will be there. The studs are on there. And the reason I say consolidate the studs is just that we need to make sure that when we're new in theatre, like we are just now, that we've got the same studs for everyone else. So the collector frequency is given by the formation leader. He will say, we'll check in on our discrete frequency, look at the knee board, that's stud 7. Right, let's use X as a collector frequency. It'd be nice if the spare one's down the bottom, but I've not got one in front of me to see what it is. So it is there in the knee board, and certainly when the mission makers do the missions, there is a knee board there. So it's really, what I'm getting at is not establishing it, is you telling you to decide as a formation leader which have a collector frequency, have one, so that if all goes wrong, nobody can hear each other. Shit, I better go to that frequency, whatever we briefed, 2620, stud 7, whatever you want, you brief it. But if we make it as an SOP that it gets briefed, then it stops a lot of radio faff. So believe me, it frees up a lot of capacity when you don't have a radio faff.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that would be an example. Would be, for example, with 43, we have stud 10 as a general frequency, and then stud 11 and 12 as specific flight frequency. So we could use stud 10 specifically for a 43 flight collector frequency. Perfect.
That's exactly the sort of thing. So the formation leader needs to brief that. And if then in-house, as a formation, as a squadron of 43, you say, right, guys, we'll always use 10 as collector. When you give your briefing, you can just say frequency, collector frequencies, SOP.
Yeah, and then if we're operating into squadron, then we can probably use guard because everyone monitors that, hopefully.
Yeah, you could do, but if you could do as a push comes to shove. But yes, that's something you could do. But if everyone's got stud 10, you could just nominate. If you're operating with all three, you're going to liaise with all three. You as a formation leader, you decide. But yes, that is perfect.
I don't want Hornets transmitting on stud 10. That would not be.
It's not natural, that is it?
No, it's wrong.
So okay, well that's the radio stuff, radio SOP. So I managed to get that out in 10 minutes, but it should have been a bit quicker. Any more questions on radios? Nothing really new there, but we're just warming up. Any thoughts? No questions? Cool. Moving on. Operating SOPs. One of the things I noticed when I started doing DCS stuff and multiplayer was there's a lot of chat on the frequencies, which doesn't really need to be there. So sticking with the radio side of things, often when you do a check-in, when you hear the guy, what you don't do is say loud and clear and then tell him to do something. Because if you tell him to do something, it clearly means you've heard him. But it's really hard to get used to until you get the hang of it. So, for example, Vixen check, 2, 3, 4, Vixen stud 1, go. You don't go Vixen check, 2, 3, 4, loud and clear. Right, Vixen stud 1, go. Do you see what I mean? So none of this loud and clear, Roger, Wilco, and all that kind of stuff. If you've heard the guy, you give him an instruction. If you haven't heard the guy, you'll say, oh, Vixen check, do it again. And if not, then you're on the collector frequency. And what that will also do comes into my next part in terms of operating SOPs, keeping the chat down to a minimum. So an SOP climb speed for the wing, caveat to attach to this in a minute, is 300 knots. So always climb at 300 knots. Cruise speeds, 350 or at 360, it's essentially the same thing. 350, 360 knots when you're not at low level, 420 at low level, and 480 on target runs. Anything different to that, if you brief it, then the guys know what to do. You shouldn't have to brief it. Those speeds are then kind of SOP. So if you're climbing away from the airfield and you're going up to the tanker, 300 knots. If you're cruising to the range at 1,500 feet, 360 knots. If you're going into low level, 420 knots. Nobody needs to say anything. So when you come off the range and you go up and you're at 2,000 feet, transiting back to Cogoletti, your guy that's joining on your wing knows it's 350 knots, 360 knots. You don't have to say anything. Now, the caveat I'm going to add to that is guys in the Tomcats, Hornets, Harriers, if you find your performance is all wrong, then it doesn't matter. Change it, but change it within your aircraft type. So the wing formation is that, but you can always add a caveat to it. So if the Tomcat doesn't like to be at 300, I'll leave that to you guys. Any objections to that? Can you think of any problems with 300 knots climb speeds and the speeds I've given?
No, that's what we've been using so far as well, so that's good.
Yeah,
That shouldn't be a problem.
and that means that so when you're joining in a formation in a normal sort of scenario, you don't have to call your speeds or anything like that. The only time you would call anything really is if the guy's not visual with you. You have to tell him where you are, what you're heading, or what your height is, that kind of thing. You could add the speed on the end of it, but generally speaking, there's a lot of unnecessary, calling things out that are SOPs, so they don't get called. So that covers that, and you can have your own SOPs within aircraft types. The other one is when you do your TAC turns, make them 4G turns. That is one of the common errors that I'm finding with the guys on the TAC turn stuff. They are doing a lot more than 4G or a lot less than 4G. And the tricky part is to try and establish what that rate looks like at 420 knots. The other clue, what we used to do in real life, your G suit starts to inflate at 4G, and I've noticed you start to get the heavy breathing at 4G in DCS, although you don't often hear it when it's happening. So try, guys, and get used to that rate, and then all your TAC turns later will work out. You can adjust your G as you need to make the TAC turn work if it's not working. But if you do your 4G turns, then that will be the way that works.
4 might be a bit much for the Harrier DM, just in terms of sustained turns. When we've got bomb load on, it bleeds a lot of energy at 4G.
I was going to add to that. So another caveat for each aircraft type, can you do just establish what you want? The Tornado heavy loads, we would do 2 to 3G because you're not flashing the wings around, but 3G might work. So guys, work something out, but make sure that everyone has got the same within your aircraft type is the secret there. The other thing about general formation SOPs, I'm going to take this away just for now, is joining into formation. As you get airborne off the airfield, in fact, I'll tell you what, let's go to my bigger area picture here. We've lined up on the runway, and I'll come back to a little bit more of that. We're getting airborne as a stream takeoff. I've seen quite a lot recently with the new guys that I've been flying with, not aggressively cutting the corner. And what I mean by that, we've done a 3 or 5 second stream, so off he goes. A couple of seconds later, he goes. I'll brief that I'm going to do a turn. They know that I'm going to be initially at 300, but then settling down to 350 because I said I'll be at 2,000 feet heading to the north, and you're doing this as a formation leader. What I'm expecting to see is when this guy's coming up after you is massively and aggressively cutting the corner. He's still flying at an overtake speed that's sensible. So let's say we're level now. You're going to be at 360 as the leader. This guy doesn't want to be doing more than 380, 390. Where he's getting his overtake is the fact that he is leading you massively, and that's your basic air combat technique. So as we come around the corner, he's leading. And that's the reason you only have 20 knots to 30 knots of overtake on a turning join, because your overtake is not the speed, your overtake is the lead as you come on in onto the guy. So when you're looking over your shoulder, I can't obviously draw that for you, but if I'm seeing an aircraft really swept, he's taking sod all lead. I need to be seeing him out here, and I know he's pointing there to meet me when I get there. That's what lead is, obviously. You guys are all familiar with that. So be more aggressive on your lead, but as you do that, you're still in full power. You need to be holding your speed with only 20 or 30 knots of overtake. Does that make sense, guys, what I've just described there?
Yeah.
Because too many times we see someone, we're getting airborne, right, we'll all join up, here we go. You've done 3 orbits before the fellas got in. That would really be quite unacceptable. So really, really aggressive lead taken on him, knowing he's going to roll out heading north because that's what he briefed. So always having situation awareness, but only carrying an extra 20 knots of overtake. The difference is, and I am going to put a video out on how to join in formation the Air Force way, which is forward, up and in, until you get more experienced at it, and talk about the overtake. On a straight and level rejoin, you do not want more than 50 knots of overtake, and you're drawing lower than the other fellow. And so you come along at 2 spans out, you come forward, you basically come to a stable position like you do on a tanker. So you've got your 50 knots of overtake. He starts to bloom in the windscreen, is what we used to say. He's getting big. I better control this. Adjust your power, put the air brakes out, stabilize. You might just bounce off the stabilized position for a nanosecond before you move on, but you stabilize, and then you control it forward, up to his level, and into the formation reference. Any questions there?
Nope.
So the learning point there is, sorry, I saw someone light up there. Was that a question?
No, it was just me agreeing, saying no.
Nobody can hear me. I can't hear them.
I can hear you, dear.
Got you now. It's a dodgy connection here. Try again, Badger.
I can hear you now. I can still hear you. I heard you all the way through.
Yeah, sorry. I know my microphone's lighting up, but I'm not hearing stuff when it lights up. Did someone have a question?
No, we said we agreed with you. It was fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Where was I at with that? So that's for the formation join. If you do that, you'll find your formation joins work a lot better. So now I'm going to talk about moving around the airfield. What point is what? Someone say something, make sure I can hear you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, got you. It's a dodgy connection I've got. All right, guys, 07 and 25. You know that would be a heading of 250. That's a heading of 070. It's actually about 5 or 6 degrees off, which is probably established already. I'm going to give you a couple of top tips on what radio calls should be as we come on in. And I'm going to cover some of the bits and pieces, the questions I've had more recently about formations of larger numbers. Now, the flying order book and everything we've got, and the real Coboletti, or whatever it's actually called, it's just not Coboletti, is circuits to the south. So 25, it's a left-hand circuit. 07, it's a right-hand circuit, as you know. The initials point is 3 to 5 miles. Again, it varies in flying order books in various places on the extended centerline. So let's look at runway 25 first. The basic circuit pattern, we fly oval circuits. I'm going to draw on my map now, okay? We fly oval circuits, and they fly relatively tight circuits. What you mustn't do is do the civvy light aircraft square type circuit. But you must also play fairly tight down here, but not too tight, such that you've got too much alpha on as you come around the corner. If you're landing on this runway here for 07, if you point, that lake is in slightly the wrong place, but if you point, the lake should be there, not out to sea. That's your lake. If you point about that point on the lake, turn in when you're about 45 off, 650 feet halfway around. Those of you that saw my original circuit video, that's basic maths. If that's at 1,000 feet, you've got your 300 foot point here, which is about a mile off. That's 700 feet to lose. Half of that is 350. Add it to the 300, is 650 there. That's how you fly a circuit. Now, those of you that fly carrier type aircraft, you're going to do that at full flap and on speed. As long as everybody does that, you don't catch each other up. The problem that we often see is circuits, all really varying circuits. A lot of people going a long way downwind and a lot of people going very, very wide. And that can happen if the brake is either too aggressive or not aggressive enough. You get bunched up. We see it on the range as well, where guys don't end up with in the right place. Any questions on that so far?
No, that's good.
All gone quiet. Brilliant. So that works obviously. Yeah, go on.
Just thinking Harriers and nozzles. I've always worked on sort of 62 on that downwind. Although I often find that I'm going really slow on that in comparison. Is that generally the norm?
Yeah, again, that comes with a caveat, because the Harrier guys, they're going to brief what kind of approach they're going to do. So your Tomcat and Hornet guys, as you would be at the same home base of different aircraft types, you're aware of what other people are actually doing in the circuit. So Harrier guys, you need to work out your own SOP, which I know is 60 nozzle, but it depends on where you're going to do it. So can I task you guys to go and establish that and brief it? And then that way your circuits will be the same, because it's all geometry. And the guys in the Tomcats and the guys in the Hornets will know that Harriers do weird circuits, and their traffic for real would know as well, so they stay out of the way. So I've not really answered your question and say establish it as an SOP within the Harrier force.
What we've done to date, and I think it's probably the SOP going forward, is if we're on our own in the circuit, we'll fly around the circuit the same as we do around the boat. So we'll basically have the 60-degree nozzle downwind and about 120 knots. But if there are other aircraft in the circuit, delay putting the nozzle in until you're rolling out on final, basically.
Yeah, that would make it. That would work. And as long as you guys stick to that SOP, you don't balk too many of the guys on the other aircraft types.
And just to be aware that obviously we're aware that if you make the right radio calls, we know there's Harriers in the circuit, and so we won't. We'll go around or just extend or whatever else to give you room. So it's not a problem.
Absolutely, and that brings me on to the next point, really, which is the radio calls. And I forget who I've told this about already when I've been flying with you guys. I've been doing it a lot more with the new 234 squadron guys. The calls that are made in the circuit, the only calls that are made are when you're in the circuit downwind. So let's assume now, let's clean it up. I'll do it with a gold pen. We're now landing on runway 25. The downwind position is here, going that way at 1,000 feet at your downwind point. The call then is downwind. If you do it, say it here because you got distracted, the call is late downwind, because people joining the circuit if they can't see you, they'll be listening for you. They go, I can't see him, I can't see him, I can't see him. And then they hear Vixen 1 late downwind to land. Right, he's here. I know where to look. And he can see him. So there's downwind, late downwind, and as you come around final, about here, the call is final gear down. Not base. We don't call it base. The only time we would call it base in the Royal Air Force or the Royal Navy as Brits is when we're operating at an American airfield and they require us to do so. So we're in Nellis or something like that. We would play by their rules. If they say it's a 764-foot circuit pattern, we'd fly at 764 and we must call base, whatever, we would do it. But at home base, we stick to our own British bestest way. So there's your downwind, there's your late downwind if you miss your downwind, and there's your final gear down. And every individual aircraft would call that if they're operating in the circuit together, unless you've joined the circuit as a formation, you're coming in for a visual run-in and break. So the break by lead from the dead side, this is the dead side. There's nothing happening there, it's dead. This is the live side, the stuff happening here. As he breaks, he makes the call, Vixen, 2 aircraft, break land. This guy pauses, it's 3 seconds or whatever you brief, but an SOP would be 3 seconds, and he makes a break. The break call by lead is the downwind call for everybody. So this guy does not call downwind or late downwind. The next call number 2 makes is what?
Turning finals?
Yeah, he makes a call final gear down. So what's going to happen is, let's take it right back from the start. Lead calls Vixen 2 aircraft initials, or Vixen initials. Air traffic knows how many because they heard you check in when you got onto frequency. You said Vixen and you heard 2. Right, that's 2 aircraft coming in. Vixen initials. Roger, Vixen, circuit clear. Vixen 2 aircraft on the break, land. Vixen 1 final gear down. Vixen 1 clear land. Vixen 2 final gear down. Vixen 2 clear land. Vixen 3 final gear down. Vixen 3 clear land. So the only call for the break is lead, which equals a downwind call for everybody else. If you're just bashing a circuit because you're good conscientious pilots after a sortie because you did final or downwind, on the break touch and go, he does his touch and go, he then calls downwind next time, final gear down, he then calls downwind next time, because you're not operating together as a formation. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead. Actually, that's outside my remit because the mission builders did used to put the ATIS on, then they took it off. I'm tempted to suggest that we nominate a duty runway each week. I know that's unrealistic, but then we know where we're at, or something like that. Or, as you say, add the caveat. I'm going to leave that to people higher in authority than me to decide that, but it's a good point because otherwise you've got people head to head.
I'm working on the script at the moment. It's going to add ATIS backend for the bases we operate out of, but also a pseudo ATC, so you can basically get the active runway and the weather at every other airfield as well while you're flying around.
Okay,
Excellent.
keep an eye out for that then. But yeah, it's important. That's a good question. In as much as it's important, we are doing this on the same runway as we come on in. Any questions? Any further questions on that? So that's sort of basic circuit type SOPs. I want to talk about something that comes up with a lot of confusion in terms of tactical formation. I'll be moving on to tactical formation in just a moment. About arrow, heavy side left, heavy side right, and what it all means. Hands up if you've got a query on that, because I'm sure there's bound to be. If you recall, the arrow formation is something like, here's my number 4, something like that. We're all heading in this direction. Forget the airfield now. The airfield's not here. We're just tooling around in arrow. Fairly familiar with that, I take it.
Yep.
So you've got, it's nice to get some feedback there. I know my headset's working again. You've got your 4 aircraft here. Remember, that's a 75-degree angle and a 75-yard-meter spacing between. And what it means is that 2, 3 have got that freedom of movement, and 4 has got the freedom of movement. But you see, 4's freedom of movement is absolutely massive in terms of where he could be. For him to switch sides, it's just a hell of a job. So what he tends to do is he tends to be on the same side as 3. If you're doing a prolonged turn at low level, you end up in a kind of a trail. Oops, that's me banging on the camera. You end up in a kind of a trail anyway. But once you come out of that turn, and we're heading now to the south, you might end up in that position there. And it doesn't actually matter what side the guys are on. You can choose. But convention would state, if you're number 3, you're just tooling along, you can see 2's on that side. Right, I'll take this side. It's not written down. It just is. It's just what you do, because it would just be a bit odd. You could technically be like that in arrow, but nah, it's just not very good. Not very pretty either. So that's how you are. And 4 tends to be on the same side as 3. It's the exact art and subtle science of flying airplanes. Yeah, you can't write down every certain thing that the guys have to do. So that's what it tends to be. Now the heavy side, let's put them heading up north, so we've got a better sort of picture. The heavy side in this instance is heavy side right, clearly because the heavy side with airplanes, with more airplanes, is on the right-hand side. And we use that heavy side right or heavy side left to decree what side I want you on. Why would I do that? Well, I would do that because we're running in for a visual run-in and break. And I want to say, in preparation for this run-in and break, we're coming in now. Imagine the airfield is back in again. We're coming in now on runway 25. It's a left-hand brake. I want to be braking away from where there's more aeroplanes. So you would come in. If you're doing an arrow brake, you would say, arrow, heavy side right. And that's telling them, normally you can go whatever side you like. I don't care. But just now, coming from initials, arrow, heavy side right, please. Which puts number 2, obviously, on the inside, ready for the brake. Now, some of you have seen this before, and it's written in the SOPs. The old, I've lost it now, the circuit training video talked about it. And what happens there, as you come in from initials, again, nobody's going to tell number 2 to do this. He needs to be listening. We're British pilots. We don't just wait to tell the leader to tell us what to do. He knows he's coming for initials because he knows we're straightened out. He knows the airfield's in front of him. He's got his head out the cockpit, and he hears the leader call initials. And we come to stud 1, then he hears him call initials, and he goes, right, I better telegraph my intentions to him that I know he's going to break over the top of me. Descends just enough, just a wee bit, such that he sees that you're low. Mean a point that you know he can see you, and then he'll break over the top of you when the time comes. Number 2 breaks next, then 3, then 4. Any questions there? Does that make sense?
Makes sense?
Gravy.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, the other time you would use arrow heavy side left, and we used to use this attack weapons unit, was to train it or to do it. So you could say, I don't envisage any circumstance when we do it. We could say, even with a pair, we'll recover arrow with you on the left. Or if we had 3 aircraft, let's say we've got the bounce, we'll recover arrow heavy side right. There is no heavy side because there's no number 4 there. But that means the heavy aircraft, if they were, would be on the right-hand side. I'm sure that makes sense. Yeah. So that's why we would use it. So you need to envisage it as to why it is. The beauty of coming in in Arrow is that we can whiff a deal and maneuver all around here and do the tightest turn because we fucked it up at this point there, and everyone will hang in there because it's Arrow. If you try to make a tight turn here in Echelon as a 4-ship, you're going to be Echelon right, aren't you? Because you're going to break to the left. If you do heavy maneuvering at all, and they can only really be left-hand turns, think how hard that is to maneuver. And you get a lovely, what the Americans call parade formation going that way, but you try and maneuver that from up here. Sorry, I put my finger where you couldn't see it. It's almost impossible because you cannot do right-hand turns in Echelon like that without this guy getting his throttle all the way back to his armpit and his air brakes out. We'd have an utter nightmare in a fast jet. So that's why make it a bit of a convention that you come back in Arrow. If you're going to be Echelon, you come back in Arrow, and if you brief an Echelon brake at initials, instead of dropping down, this guy gets in. Get in quick, so these guys can get in, and you get that nice tidy formation for the Echelon brake. Any questions there?
Nope.
Great.
Brilliant. So these are kind of unwritten rules. You won't find that written in the SOPs, but these are the things that happen, and this is what you do to make it work. Let me just take that a little bit further, guys, then, to tie on with some of the questions that I've had more recently as to what side and who goes where. So in Echelon, the leader can say Echelon left or right. Fairly self-explanatory. If you've got 3 aircraft, Echelon left, or Echelon right, or Echelon left. Problem comes when you've got 3 aircraft and you go into Vic. This is obviously number 3. That gold isn't standing out. 1, 2, 3. That is Vic. 2 is always on the right-hand side, unless you call it reverse Vic. The only way you will find yourself caring about what side someone is on in a 3-ship is if you're maneuvering a formation to do aerobatics, maneuvering a formation to do a fly past, or you're maneuvering a formation, you come back with the bounce and you want to figure out how to get everybody on the correct side. Well, I want everyone to break 1, 2, and 3. So the easy way out, always take the simple way, is come back in Arrow. And then you just say, right, let's go into Echelon right for the arrival. So nobody ever goes through Vic, ever. The only time we do Vic is essentially training or fly past in a tactical environment. You just don't play with it. You just don't do it. What do we do if we had 4 aircraft? Well, I have never been in Vic with 4 aircraft. Convention states I've seen where even numbers go on the right-hand side. So there's number 4. It's all just TFD. You just don't bother. The Red Arrows are doing it every day. They've got their own SOPs. What you do on a fast jet squadron, if you have to do something more complex, you're either in Arrow, going as a unit of 4, or pairs trail, 2 units of 2. Sort yourselves out, make it look nice. When you come to initials, put yourself either in Arrow, as I briefed, or Echelon. If you start messing around with finger 4 or whatever you want to do, or reverse Vic, or end up in a point where if you have to brake to the right, you brake 1, 3, 2, 4, everyone's mind's just going to go mental. Air traffic will go, why is 3 before 2? What's going on? You just don't do it on a fast jet squadron. It just never, ever, ever happens unless you've briefed it to happen. Is that making sense? Does it answer some of the questions that have been asked previously?
Yeah.
That's great.
So ultimately, it's basically what you're saying is just like, brief it, do as much prep as possible, so you're not mincing around, doing freeform jazz.
Yeah, basically. And so freeform jazz is a good analogy because I hate jazz and it's shit. But yeah, exactly that. And keep it really, really simple, because the hardest working person in this entire formation, even this guy number 4, thinks he's working hardest to cling on to everybody and being whiplashed all over the place with the way formation move. It's this guy. It's this guy's trying to figure out how to dodge the weather, how to get to initials, where the hell is everybody else? Are they on the correct side? How's this going to work? If there's a collision, it's my fault because I didn't brief it properly and he broke into him.
How do I get my sunglasses on?
Yeah, exactly. And how the fuck do I get my targeting pod to work again? It won't slave. Stuff like that. So the simple method is maneuver to initials in Arrow and put yourself in the Echelon afterwards. It doesn't matter if you come in with a left-hand brake. It doesn't matter if you're maneuvering this way. The boys know. They go, all right, we're in Arrow. Here we come to initials. You just see that. Because 4 is latched onto 3. But like I said, because of that whiplash. You'll always generally be on the same side, okay? So this guy just goes like that, and everyone goes, yeah, here we go, bang, sorted for the arrow break. For the echelon, they just move across when they're ready. And you go, and they're in, and everybody closes in. 2, you've got to be snappy, because 3 and 4 can't get in. There's nothing worse than that, because 2's just a wee bit slow. Yeah. The other thing to think about is when you're operating as a 4, an unwieldy, when you go together, you'll do it in arrow. And sometimes you have a cause to be together in arrow. But generally speaking, because you're operating tactically, you might be in card. And who knows, let's just put 4 on that side and 3 on that side. These guys have done something with deals, they're on the wrong side. It doesn't matter. Don't let your OCD take into account that 4 should be behind 2 in card. And remember, those of you that have done it with me more recently, you don't always see the guys up front, do you? You just have to trust that they're in the right place. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. Each individual element needs to be thinking, where is the front element in here? But lead, yes, he's responsible for the whole lot, but really he's controlling the first 2 in safety terms, in maneuvering, in direct maneuvering terms. In big strategic maneuvering, yes, he might say go somewhere else to a different target. But in terms of actual on-the-spot maneuvering, he's just caring about these 2 and trusting his number 3, who happens to be on the right-hand side today, to lead the number 4. And his job is to make sure that these guys are where they should be, hopefully, or keeps track of where they are and maneuvers his pair to be in the right place to comply with his brief. The same applies then. So if we then go into through the canyons and the valleys and what have you, they go into arrow, we go into what we would call pairs trail. And these guys are, again, their own little element. These guys are their own little element. It's still a 4, still Vixen 1, 2, 3, and 4, but these guys got freedom of maneuver, dead easy. Likewise here. Don't get bunched if you're number 3 and you can't see the other guys. If you know that they're ahead of you because you just caught a glimpse a second ago, but now you're blind, unless he's been a real fuckwit and coming back this way without telling you, you know he's still up there 30 seconds ahead of you. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you find it's an easy way to operate. So you're coming out of low level, for example, and you're in card. You could do this without any radio at all, with the airfield being here. You can come out of low level in card because you briefed it somewhere, you know, when we're 20 miles out or when we cross the ridge line that goes between Coboletti and Kutaisi, which is up here somewhere. What I want you to do is switch into arrow. Okay, arrow, and we're going to have an echelon break. So these guys just do that. You come around the corner, you do that, and you look at it. What side am I on? He goes there, he goes there, he goes there. No radio whatsoever. None, because you briefed it. And you just started it up here somewhere to make it happen. Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. What else have we got from that? So that's really cool. So we're really getting there. So that's a bit on the tactical. I've got a little bit more tactical to do. I won't do close formation just yet. Let's do a little bit more tactical. I'm not going to cover what battle formation is. Does anyone not know what battle formation is? You guys all got it. Brilliant. Arrow, head side left covered. Assisted turns. All I'm going to talk about with assisted turns, because those of you that have done it with me and seen the video, you get the general idea. A couple of things that have come to mind from back in the day that I remembered, and I often see it with DCS players, is they flash around with their hair on fire, expecting everything to happen at once and quickly. It doesn't. So what I mean by that is, if this is our track 12, we're in our formation at this point, and we're going to do a 45 to the starboard, 45 to the right. I think nowadays, for the younger generation, they call it right and left. You're going to do a 45 starboard. So if it's a nav route and that's your waypoint, it just happens. Nobody calls it unless it gets missed and the leader has to call it because number 2's not done it. In this instance here, you're going to go to the right. Who avoids?
2.
Out to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, the outside
One.
man.
Outside man, which is number 1 today. If we were like this, it'd be number 2 that avoids because he's the outside man. He's the outside of the turn. That's the inside of the turn. This is the outside. So let's leave them like that. 2. Let's put them round to prove the point that it's not always the subordinate element that avoids. So in this instance, it's the outside man that's going to avoid. And the point I'm going to make, fellas, is it's a 20-degree assist. And what that means is that Lead here is going to turn an extra 20 degrees. 2, it's going to turn in 20 degrees. So what's going to happen? And this is the point I'm trying to lead up to. DCS players often just go everywhere with their hair on fire. If you've ever done aerobatics online, people are flying formation at 590 knots. For fuck's sake, it's just ridiculous. You just don't have to be there with your hair on fire. And the same applies for the geometry. So what happens is this guy will make his turn, this guy makes his turn. It takes a finite time for that to happen. It's not instant. It's this massive aggressive maneuver. You make the turn, you watch it happen, there's the cross, and it just becomes a 90, like we've seen as one of the basic maneuvers. Looking over your shoulder without crashing, he reverses onto the track, new track 12, and he does as well. But this point here, when you've gone from here and here to the crossover, it takes time. It doesn't happen in 1 second. It takes 3, 4, 5 seconds for it to happen. And you're going to be convinced that it's not happening quickly enough. So you put the power up, and I see this a lot. You put the power up, and they yank the stick a bit harder to make it all happen with your hair on fire. You've still got to cover. That is a couple of miles. So if you can bear that in mind, I think you'll find that your assisted turns will work out a lot better. So give it a go. Has anyone been practicing? Anyone had a go? Or I know some of the new guys have been up to it. Yeah. Yeah, and it just comes with practice, mate. You just have to practice, and end up using the force. And like we say with the Harrier guys, you just find a G that works now because you've obviously not got the excess power. On the subject of avoidance, I've reiterated outside man avoids. This is important. I know someone that got killed way back in the late 80s by not doing the avoidance properly. Got blind, didn't see to avoid, and they ended up colliding. And one of the guys didn't make it in Jaguars. What else to do? Boom, 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 boom. Common errors, G and speed. This is why we're doing the new guys on the A4, because all they've got to look at is their speed and their heading and the G meter, which is quite hard to see on the A4. So get a feel for it. If you're looking in the cockpit for too much, it's going to go horribly wrong. Your turns won't always work out. So what you'll find is when you do this bit here, and you've crossed, you should be looking over your shoulder, A, to see where your oppo is, but B, to check that there's nobody following your oppo. And then you adjust the turn. If you think, I'm really going to have to tighten this turn, tighten the turn, because that is your opportunity to correct it, or slacken the turn. Whatever you do, mutually, you figure it out so you roll out in battle. And that's the secret of getting good battle as you do it. Guys, I'm nearly coming to the end here. I just want to talk about close formation stuff. We haven't really done any yet, but it'd be really nice if we saw some weather in some of the stuff we did and some close formation stuff on a close formation approach. And to that end, I think we need to discuss the SOPs for starting off on the runway when we get going. So I'm talking about lineup now, 4-ship lineup. You never get airborne as a 4-ship. We are not the Blue Angels or the Red Arrows. So you'll only ever get airborne as a pair if you do it as a pairs takeoff. But if you're a 4-ship, what you need to have is 2 pairs going off. So there's your center line there. Wind is from the left. We put the echelon left. Lead, we'll take that position there. 2, take that position there. 3 is tucked right up in there to avoid jet wash. And 4 down here. That's the sort of position we like to see on a 4-ship lineup. You'll have at least 10 seconds between these 2 pairs. Remember, if they don't join up because they're going into weather, it doesn't matter because these 2 are almost autonomous, just following the general intent of the commander of the formation here. So the secret is to get number 3 right up there and then number 4 in his side of the runway at that point there. When we go for the wind-up in the real world, what happens is we line up on the runway. The lead will stick his finger up and twirl it. You've all seen that on videos and stuff. 2 will twirl his finger and move it round so 3 can see it. 3 will do the same so 4 can see it. So it's passed down the line without anyone saying anything. The thumb comes up from number 4. Number 3 sees number 4's thumb, passes it to number 2. Number 2 obviously sees the thumbs and it comes up. So eventually lead has seen the thumb from number 2 who won't show his until he's seen 3. So that all makes sense, I'm sure. Yeah. So what you end up with is no talking at all when we get for this takeoff. What I would like us to do is establish an actual SOP. I know within each formation that you guys have probably done it aircraft types, but one thing I have seen is the waggle of the controls to do the initial power up to 80%. Is that fair to say? Do you guys still do that?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we do, I think the Harrier 60% is probably better as well because you've got such a low waggle. But if you can do it such that the lead does a waggle, 2 does a waggle, everyone acknowledge the waggle down the line. So 4 sat there can go, oh, there's the waggle. Right, wind up. 4 give another waggle and then send the waggle all the way back up again. If that makes sense. And that way the lead knows to go and nobody says anything.
Yep.
That makes sense?
Yeah. DM, quick question, mate. On your map, shouldn't there be a poncho-shaped hole 3/4 the way down the runway?
You had to go there, bloody hell.
You're funny, I'll kill you last, he says. Yeah. So if we can sort of practice that and do that, it becomes really, really slick, guys. And one of the things talking about the fast jet philosophy is knowing a job that's gone well in all respects. It's not just about turning the target into flying chunks of stuff. It's about coming back and going, that went really well because we did it with SOPs. We did this. Nobody had to tell me to do anything. I just knew what to do and I did it. And it's SOPs and knowing this stuff that makes that work. Believe me, that gives you a real good feeling of satisfaction when, as a unit, as a team, it all works. It's how sort of elite groups bond and get together by getting it right and doing it right together and knowing that we're all dependent on each other and we're all doing the same thing. If you do that, it really does work. And if you think about it, it gets there. So on close formation, again, another thing, I'm just going to brief this as an SOP because, again, I don't think there's enough understanding on it. We don't do as much close formation as we could. The only time you'd ever do close formation really in a fast jet is to penetrate weather or for practice, or you can't have too many aircraft in the circuit at one time, just doing a straight-in approach with 2 of you, something like that. The difficult part is that in DCS, we can't see each other. So when leader wants one of his services for number 2, he can't give the gear signal. The gear signal is really hard to do. Believe it or not, it's like this. Some people think it's that with your hand. It's not. It's actually like that, up and down, screw motion like that. You can't see that in DCS. So we have to do what we would do in IMC or basic students. And we say, gear, gear, go. The gear does not go on the go. What happens is everybody, when they hear the word go, including the leader, pause, select. So you get the leader saying, Vixen, gear, gear, go. Pause, select. So the select is when you push the button. Everyone's done the same pause. And sometimes you hear it very, some guys have tried this and they get gear, gear, go, and they do it on the go. Then the leader's gear comes out, number 2 goes whistling forward, all that kind of stuff. So if you always do gear, gear, go, pause, select. Likewise, flat, flat, go, pause, select. Air brake, go, pause, select. Because we can't do hand signals, guys. If only we could, then that would just be brilliant, but we can't. So that way you'll stay in formation because the drag comes out instantaneously at exactly the same time for both aircraft types, well, for both aircraft, generally speaking. Again, it's probably not relevant because we don't really do a lot of it, but if you ever end up doing it, that's the thing you need to be thinking about. And on a formation landing, the final thing is don't drop low. I don't know how well the weight vortex is modelled in these aircraft on DCS, but in the real world, if you drop low, you can be flipped upside down by weight vortices. I've come close to it happening to me, uncontrollable. We managed to get away from it, but it can happen. So good habit is you must look forward and do your own landing at some point. So in a close formation landing, if you do one, let's just say someone's got battle damage or lost their instruments because there's a random failure set in there or battle damage, whatever. As you approach the final part of the runway, you choose your own landing point, and fighters land on the numbers, or if you're in formation on either side of the numbers. You don't go for the touchdown markers as us airline pilots do these days, but you still choose your own touchdown point. Obviously, try not to overtake the other guy. You touch down at about the same time. 2, you're responsible to get your brakes on, because 1 will not put his brakes on until he sees 2 retarding back. When 2 starts to retard, then he'll put his brakes on. And here's another SOP. We're going to turn off to the left. 1, you can't just do that, because if 2 suddenly loses his brakes, bang, you need to wait to hear clear cross. If you're landing this echelon starboard, doesn't matter. You can come off when you like. You're on the slow side. He will not go onto the slow side till he's ready. The slow side is the exit side for the runway. And the same would apply when you land off a formation running and brake. So 1's landed. When he's slow, just move to the slow side, because this guy, if he's got no brakes, he's got a whole 2/3 of a runway to go through on. Little things like that tidy the whole thing up and do it like proper fast jet guys. It's all boring esoteric formation stuff, but it's the stuff that happens for real. I'm sure most of you knew that sort of stuff anyway. Any questions so far?
No.
Nope.
Brilliant. Well, I've done all the talking, guys. That's it. There's not been a lot new in there, so it's more just reiterating the stuff that we've had already. Are there any questions on anything?
Nope.
Go ahead. I don't know the answer to that. My thought process would be, if we're doing a mission where it's time critical, I'd expect the mission planner, I think there's an option, and Dunky and Swifty, you'll know this more than me, there's an option, I think, to make the server only start when someone occupies the first aeroplane. Is that fairly true to life? True to say?
I think that's just a standard. I think the server pauses if no one's on it.
Okay. So if it's if we get into the habit of, if something is time critical or you want to add a time, you just make sure that you know that the server starts at 0800 or whatever, because the mission planners will do that, and when they brief it, they'll say it's going to start at this time. And just don't have a check until 10 minutes after. Anything else?
Just going back to the start there with the check-in. Say as lead I check in Vixen flight and 2 isn't on frequency, the 3 and 4 wait for 2 to respond, then call 3 and 4. Or
no, just give it a few seconds. So if he goes Vixen check, 3, 4, at least the leader then knows 3 and 4 are there, and it's 2 that's having a faff, not got there. So yeah, do pipe up, but give 2 a bit of a chance. But yeah, do pipe up so he knows.
Okay, cool. And it's always in order, yeah?
Yeah, always in order. And another thing, never, ever, ever, if you want to be realistic, renumber the formation. The reason for that is if number 3 crashes and then number 3's widow gets told he's dead, but they renumbered halfway through and the wrong woman gets told her husband's not coming home, has happened. Air traffic get confused, everybody. So you never, ever renumber. So if someone drops out of the formation, you keep the same number. This is the Brit way. Keep the same number, but you might occupy his position in the formation. That's a real mind fuck. But you stay where you are. You never ever change number.
Got it.
Anything else, guys?
Denji, just one quick question in regards to navigation exercises and turns. For example, on the navigation exercise, say at 2:53, if you're in battle formation, you just have to turn on to the next leg. When does, for example, the 2 is preempting, is getting ready for the 90 turn, does number 2 start to turn onto the next leg at the time, or does number 2 turn early so that lead is turning at his time at 2:53 for the next track?
That is coming right back into the exact art and subtle science. Where the timing matters the most is your IP and your target, as it is the case with the navigation. So yes, you would take into account, but not by much, mate. Really, if the turning point is at 2 minutes 53, you see your clock coming up to, it's 2:48, you think, I just need a couple more. Yeah, I'll turn a wee bit early. It's not that important. That's drilling down too much and worrying too much. But what I'm trying to say is the principle is there, but don't worry too much about it. Because if you're 2 or 3 seconds wrong on your timings because you didn't do that, 5 seconds early, you're still within the bracket as we discussed previously, but also you can make that up by flying your target because you've got that power generally to accelerate to 540 instead of 480 on the target. Just push it up on the target run. So don't sweat it for 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds. 30 seconds, yeah, well, that's just 30 seconds late. Shit, we'll all turn 30 seconds early, and then we'll fine-tune it down to how many seconds early.
Gotcha.
Did that answer what you mean?
Yeah. So the main cool. So there's no definite SOP. It's more the idea that you're just turning roughly when you should be. It's not the idea of right. Okay, I'm going to turn early because Lee's going to turn at the 2:53, so I'm going to be turning early to get so he's set up turning at the right time.
No,
it's more or less you're doing it when you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely right. So do it if the turn is at 2:54 on your clock. Turn at 2:54 on your clock, and you know that there's your waypoint here, as we discussed. You get to the 2:54 here. You're the number 2. Lead is itching. Is he going to make the turn? Is he going to do that 45 that way? Here he goes. He's turned early. Brilliant. Well, let's call it a 90 actually, because that's always best. Cool. He's turned. Awesome. And around we go. Do you remember what happens if he doesn't turn? You're the lead, and you want him to turn because you've got a different plan or something else has come up. Can you?
You'll start furiously miking to tell the guy to start turning it. You'll start key miking or radio miking or the push the talk. Say right, mate, start turning. We're on to the next line.
Basically. So lots of clicks. Sorry, that some of that cut out for me there, but lots of clicks. Ideally, another way to do it without the clicks as well. One of the reasons we don't want to be clicking on the radio for real is jammers, EW. Support aircraft, they have a whole bunch of people sat there eating sandwiches, listening to all the frequencies and scanning everything. If they hear activity on a frequency, they'll start jamming it. So even the clicks could cause that to happen. In reality, one of the things we would do, this guy does a big wing flash, like turn.
Right.
He still doesn't turn. Click, 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 click. We tend to find the click clicks work for us on SRS because it's quite hard to see a big wing flash in VR. Certainly, I fly in VR, and you can't really see that sort of detail. So that would be the first option: a big wing flash to say, "Turn, you bastard." So if you saw your leader doing that, you go, he wants me to turn. Then the click, 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 click would do it, and then you make the turn. It shouldn't come as a surprise to number 2, and chances are you'll be cursing yourself, going, "Oh, it's just about to go, for Christ's sake!" But don't take it to heart. It's just how it is, because this guy is responsible for making it work. If this was a 45 instead of a 90, this guy's not assisting on a 90, but he wants you to turn. The way to do that is it's almost like the wing flash. Initiate the turn. Do your assist on the inside. Do your 20 that we've drawn on here. Start in, and you go, "Oh, why is he turning towards me? The turning point's not till here. Shit, he's turning early," which shouldn't be a surprise. So that's another way to do it. If you find yourself as leader, you've done the inward turn by 20 degrees for your assist, and he hasn't turned. Click, 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 click. I'm turning. Watch me. Avoid me. Do your turn. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
So it's kind of unwritten.
As you said, the navigation stuff, you know what sort of degrees it's going to be. It's going to be 60 degrees. Okay, I need to do a 30 assist, or sorry, 15 assist, or 30 assist. But on actual, as you say, tactical battle formation, is you can see that right. We're hitting the time. We're not onto the actual waypoint yet. So I know that you're going to go right. I have to, instead of cutting 90, I have to cut, say, you have to cut, say, 70 or 60. Yeah. So you sort of have to be, as you say, just be aware. It'll be a double assist, and I imagine there'll be a lot of the force used in those. But it'll be, as you say, you're just aware. Right, we're cutting early. Probably be an early cut because we're still not there yet, and probably speed increases and all that jazz. So yeah, a lot of the force used in these, I guess.
Absolutely, mate. So what would happen if you were turning 70, for example, instead of a 90? That is a massively early turn because you are so late, and you as number 2. Out here would be so aware that was the case, and it is using the force, and that's what it comes down to as well. Because when you look at your navigation route, we teach. We used to teach 30s, 45s, 60s, and 90s, and the reason is they're the sort of salient points to give you a rough idea. And you're absolutely right; it is using the force, because what would happen is that turn there isn't 40; it's 48. That was north. That was just so happened to be 360, and that is 048. Well, that's a 45 in my book. That's coming back to the, measuring with chalk, measuring with micrometer, marking it with chalk, and chopping with an axe. You just got to fine tune what is the important variable at the time. So 48 degrees or 50-degree turn is a 45. But how much assist? You don't do maths and go, well, instead of assisting by 20, I'm going to assist by 18.7. It just doesn't work that way, because also you want your head out the cockpit. So the simple way to remember it, guys, and I think I've written this down, but it's quite hard to pick it up. If you're doing a shackle, remember that's turning towards each other at 45. And remember, we're not flashing around with a hair on fire. It takes time for that to happen. Let it happen. Don't think this is taking too long and turning towards each other and putting the throttle up. So you turn your 45. Who avoids in a shackle?
Number 2 avoids.
Number 2, there's no outside in a shackle because you go straight ahead up to 12. Okay, so number 2, a shackle and a rotate. Number 2 avoids because he's subordinate element. Anything else, a turn that way, for example, 45 left, this guy, leader, will avoid because he's outside of the turn. This is outside. So here we are. We're coming up. Don't want to change them around, but here we are coming up on a shackle. Remember, don't rush it. Let it happen. Cross, look over your shoulder, gauge it, gauge it, gauge it. Remember, sometimes you leave it a bit late, so just come in a little bit and then carry on. That is a 0-degree turn, agreed? It was an assisted turn to turn 0 degrees. It was a massive assist to turn 0 degrees. Conversely, with a 90, it's a massive turn, but with 0 assist. And compare that with a 0 turn, massive assist. So everything else, it's hard to describe what I'm trying to get at mathematically. Everything else is somewhere in between. So a medium turn is a medium assist. A massive turn is a 0 assist. A tiny turn is a massive assist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you interpolate between 0 and 45, basically. So you just eyeball it, and it's going to be somewhere between those extremes, 0 and 45.
Absolutely right. So once you've got the boundaries of that, you know that a 90 is 0 assist, and a 0 is massive assist, somewhere in between. And it's that exact art and subtle science of doing it. But the reason we latch on to particular assist values is to give you that starting point when you learn to do it. This is the stuff that we taught attack weapons, to then go out to the squadrons and use the force. And again, painting the picture, getting used to it. So what you're generating here, when you do a double assisted turn, what you're actually generating is the 90 that you learned as the very first turn you did, which is that whole delay and crossover. It does that, doesn't it? Yeah. So you've gone for that. You're aiming for that. You're not quite crossing over, but you're aiming for that picture, that idea that you are generating a 90-degree turn by turning towards each other. Mathematically, probably not, but you're generating the concept of the 90-degree turn, and that's what that's all about. And if you get
sorry,
no, go on.
So if it was, say it was, as you say, it's not advanced, it's not exact mathematics on it, but when it comes to, say you had a 70-degree course correction instead of a 90, because the 90 will be outside man will cut, or whoever it is will come behind, and then you'll turn in towards each other. If it was on a 70 degree, for example, does that fall in the? Do you fall in the realms of double assist, or say 70 degrees, 80 degrees? Does that fall in the realms of double assist? Or will that still be the 90 procedure, but you're just slightly you're just not quite going all the way there, all the way to 90?
Yeah, it's. I think what I would find myself doing in that one is the outside man. His assist comes at the end of it all, almost. So just a tiny bit. He's just a tiny bit through the heading. There is an assist, but I can't put my finger on it, because essentially what's going to happen is that you both are going to work towards the scenario. So there's a 90. I'm not dodging the question, because it's one of those things you have to sort of be in the jet and see as you do it. And the crux of the question really is, do we assist or do we just modify a 90? Well, that's all an assist is. That's all that you're actually doing. So this guy might not actually turn in. If he does, it's just minuscule, and what's the point? So he might not even do it. But this guy, to make it work, sorry, as he does that, he might overturn, because the geometry means, oh, he's going to roll out in front of me, or sorry, behind me. If I overturn, I'm not progressing that way. I'll progress this way instead, thinking about your vectors. And so it comes from both, from your ackling the turn after the crossover.
Okay.
So you can use that to fix anything that goes horribly wrong. If the assist goes if this guy turns in by 45 degrees here, and he just has his thumb up his arse and gets it wrong, when this guy makes the turn, he will see that. He'll go, where the hell is he going? I'm going to have to assist him even more by going this way while he comes all the way back, and then you come back. And it's the bit after the crossover, that decides how the turn's going to work, as long as you've got the first part of it correct, or as close as you can. So I try not to dodge the question. It's coming back to using the force. You could just modify 90, which is the way to do that is to make sure the same track miles by adjusting the assist, and it's tiny.
Cool. So yeah, so that's actually that's perfect. That's the main question. That's the main thing is that when you start hitting those sort of 70 degree 80 realms or close to the 90, you just fly as you have to at the time.
Yeah, absolutely right. And if I drew a 70 is fairly visibly, obviously different. If you look at a map and the navigation route that I put on there, I'm going to fly with some of the guys tomorrow. There'll be 94 degrees, 86 degrees. I don't know what the differences are. That's a 90. I don't know where the boundary is to say, when is it not a 90? When is it assisting? Certainly on a 60, definitely. And so somewhere in between, whatever, and with that experience, and that's the whole point, with experience, you just figure it, you engineer it such that you achieve it.
Gotcha.
I can't give you a silver bullet for that.
No, that's fine. It's more the idea of there's no defined set procedure as to when exactly it's going to be a double assist or when it's going to be a 90.
No. The only difference, exactly. The only difference I would say with that, I seem to recall, I can't remember the exact esoterics of it. When I first joined on the Tornado Force, I think we would do a 30 in place. We wouldn't do assisted 30s because we had the power. Let me just bring it up here. We had the power on a 30 just to drive up, pretty much like the Americans might do. The Hawk, and we had less G as well. We didn't really have a lot, and we flew 6 kilometers apart on ingress tactics, which is miles away. And so assisting on a small turn was just immense because the assist is so big to achieve it. That's the difference, but that comes within the squadron SOP.
Gotcha.
My memory's a bit hazy on that. It was many years ago, so that's the difference.
Cool.
Anything else, guys?
Nope. Clear.
So, in summary, knock off the extraneous RT, brief it if it's different from the SOPs we've talked about now. Various aircraft types go off and establish your own SOPs if you want a different climb speed, as long as everybody that flies your airplane, for example, knows that it's a different climb speed. And keep it really simple. When you're the formation leader and the formation wingmen, know what the leader is trying to achieve. So don't get bunched about what side, where, unless he briefed it specifically. Think about what he's trying to achieve. We're coming into the circuit on 2.5. It's a left-hand brake. What the hell am I doing on the left-hand side? That would just be stupid unless he briefed it because he wanted to practice arrow heavy side right with no 3 and 4, a ghost 3 and 4. You wouldn't do that outside training. We used to do it in training just to make sure this guy knew that he was supposed to do it. It was training. So if you're coming in here, we're on ops now, aren't we? You're coming in here, you think, what am I doing on this side? There's nothing more frustrating as a leader to see your wingman here or way back here and he's never going to get there in time. So be in the right place, think about where you need to be and go, oh shit, I'll do it there without him telling me. There we go. I'll look over my right shoulder and go, happy days, he's in the right place. And keep it really simple. When you operate as a 4-ship, don't get bunched about who goes what side. We don't do finger 4 formation. Just operate as a separate pair back here, but still tied to these guys and do what the leader intended. So do it nice, do it in good, timely manner. And number 2, get in formation so 3 and 4 can join up. Because that part is what everyone's going to ridicule you for in the bar. If you're straggling like that.
Cool.
It's a bit shit.
Just one last question. So the number 2's default is always on the right side.
No, it's not. No, it's not default. No, it's not, because it's a left-hand circuit. With an echelon brake.
Yes, for the circuit. So the circuit, yes, it's on the. If you're left downwind, then you'll be on the right side. If it's more the once you depart. Sorry, I'll rephrase the question. Whenever you depart, and leader calls for, or not one calls for an arrow, for example, and doesn't specify, then
no, it doesn't actually matter. No, it's not a default side. It doesn't have to be. It's not a default side. What would be the default? An unofficial kind of easier default. So I mean, it's a good question because it clears it up. I have been traditionally putting 2 on the right hand side. No, if 2 thinks I'm just going to go on the left, 3 and 4 because they could technically just be anywhere around here, which is just hard work and fuel all over the place. 3 and 4 would do that. They just slot it. They go, 2's on that. Oh, we'll do that then. And then as you do a big, long, sweeping turn between that hill and that hill, he might come up on the outside. These guys might come up on the inside to cut the corner. He goes to that side. All right, we'll go to that side.
Okay.
So there's no actual SOP for it. No. The only time there's a definitive 2 is on the right-hand side is if the leader briefs it, or if he says, Vic, go. And there's your Vic. Or echelon starboard, go. Echelon port, go. There's no set place. If he just says, Vic, go, right, go on the right-hand side till he says otherwise, while 3 gets in there.
Aye. No, it's good to know that because it's nice that, because like you say, 2 is dictating on an arrow. If you're just on departure and just heading out, 2 dictates, or 3 and 4 looking where 2 is, and that will dictate where they will go on an arrow formation. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is interesting. Cool.
Exactly right. And what might happen, and I've seen it before. We used to see TAP weapon students get really bunched about it. So you've got your target runs, there's your IP, there's your target, and you've got waypoint here, waypoint there, and there's a timing trombone. You sort of covered all this for your waypoints. And what they would do, you would brief that we're going to hit this target, and I'm going to have my number 2 on the right-hand side. He's either going to join in behind me and do that, or slash across like that. Either way, I want him on the right-hand side of the IP. And guys used to draw little lines on their map to see what, because these are crossover turns. You can see what's happening here. I want him on the right. So that's straight through. It's on the right. I want him on the left. I want him on the right. I want him on the left. And if this was the airfield, you can't see that. If that's the airfield, I've got my waypoint here. I want him on the left. That's my airfield. We've just got airborne. He might say, okay, I want you to get airborne. I want you to go to arrow on the left-hand side. And then that's it. He thinks then he doesn't have to worry about what side he's on because it will naturally happen. You guys know what it's like. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. And so all his lines on the map are worthless when you get bounced and you've done this and this and this and this and this and this, and then you find he's on a different side. What I tended to do was look at it here. If he's not in the right place, shackle, go. Now he's in the right place. So think about where it's important. So don't get too bunched about it. Just make sure it's there. You're thinking ahead enough to go, yeah, he's going to be on the wrong side. I'll fix that in a minute. Still on the wrong side. No, let's fix it. Fix and shackle. Then it happens. Job done.
Fair one.
Danger, sorry, I know I said last question, but this is, sorry. It's always the case.
It's fine.
You're coming onto the IP point, then your IP, and then you're onto target. What's the procedure? You've been battled up to that point, but then you want to start going trail then for the run into target. How does that naturally happen?
Well, actually, let's talk about that. Are you guys happy for me to talk for another 10 minutes?
Yeah,
absolutely.
We'll cover it.
DM, sorry, I thank you very much. I've got to duck off now, mate. But
yeah, mate,
the recording, appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. I'm going to duck off in a minute as well. We're watching Gangs of London. We watch an episode every night. It's brilliant. If you watch it,
yeah, my house said the same thing.
Cheers, mate.
I'll see you later.
Yeah. All right, mate. See you later on. Guys, I'll only take a couple of minutes on this one then. So I think I alluded to it on the formation video, the original formation video, the tactical formation video. But let's just say, so again, stop me if I'm not answering your question. So there is the IP. There is the target, using the convention to get those things marked up. Remember, the IP, you need to see it. Your waypoints beforehand, you need to be within a bit of a cone here such that is more or less a straight on run into your IP. You can't be doing that because you will not find any of your features down the IP and you'll miss your target. You must work on something that you can navigate to without your nav kit being there. Now, if your targeting diamond is on there, awesome, brilliant. But if it's not, you're still tasked with putting the bombs there. So you've still got to find it. So that's why we use those principles. So in answer to your question then, so we're coming in from this point here, different ways on a visual attack. The basic training we did at TAP Weapons Unit back in the day is very, very different now, I'm sure. But basic training we did was a visual attack. And you would either do one of 2 or 3 things. You would give your number 2 his own IP, his own target run, to look for this hill here, that river crossing there, and the railway line that does this. and your target run was different because the river did this and you were looking at an island or something in the river. You get the idea. So you have your own target run. That's one way of doing it, okay? The separation, you would say to number 2, maintain your own separation. These are visual attacks using CBUs or something, simulated CBUs, so you didn't have a self-damage issue. So that's one way of doing it. You're coming in battle along here and you do your own thing. He must avoid you, so he might do a jink or just sweep himself just a little bit as you come up here like that to avoid. So that's the first option. That's one option. The other option, is that going to work? Yeah, that's good enough. So here's your target. 2 other ways we used to do it. One of them was you just draw a line like this, and at this hillock here, or whatever, just before he got to that mast, he's going to cut in behind me. That guarantees a separation. Remember, these were academic exercises. Tactically, not ideal because you're going plan form for the gunners here. They see you. Obviously, they've got to lead you, but also you're following the same attack track. You're all doomed. Or the number 2's got more chance of getting killed. But it's all a coordination exercise. So that's one way of doing it as you go through there. We'll talk about the egress in just a moment. The other method, I'll just keep on this line. When he gets to the mast, he then does that. So you get that. So you've got a different attack heading for each of you, and you've got separation.
DM, so would you just repeat that? Your head got in the way with that. Just.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So let me just kneel down and out the way. So what you've got here is this happening here. So you've got the same, different track, but he's going to turn in behind, and that gives you the separate track. The separation comes from the fact that geometrically, that is a bigger distance. So you're here, you'll be there as you go through. And because you've gone through on different tracks, it will confuse the enemy gunners or not make it such an obvious target to you. Does that make sense?
Right.
So the first option was separate IPs, and you do that. Quite dangerous because you might end up hitting each other. The next option, not tactically sound as it could be, is that. Third option is the best of the lot. But other considerations, if you're doing a dive attack, it's really difficult to achieve a dive attack here. So one of the things we used to do, again, you have to choose which way you're going to do it. The dive attack would do that. Sorry, that would be your target run. You would come to a point at a time which would tie in with that mast and that river bend or whatever. You would then pitch up and then tip in, because you can't pitch up and bunt is just not conducive to a good attack. So you pitch up and in. We used to have a template we put on a 50,000 map to draw that. What you're going to do with your number 2, find him his own IP or choose something where he's got good target runs. So you could have him on either side, you brief which it was, and you could either do that or something like that. It's entirely up to you how you do it. With a dive attack, though, it gets complex if you try and get him to come in on a different heading. Is that answering the question so far, yeah?
Yeah.
So the problem that we have got, and where people often get it wrong, is, or don't think about it, is what you're going to do off target. We see this sometimes on the range, don't we? Right, I've done my bombs. Oh shit, how are we going to get back together? How are we going to get back? So you need to think a little bit further ahead as to how you're going to get off the target. So this one, in fact, all of them are much the same. As you do that, just do the reverse of it. So as lead goes through, 2's coming on, give this guy a turn. Instead of just going straight through, give him a turn to make that 90 degrees. So as 2 calls off, reverse, in place, there you are in battle. But you've got to brief that. So you're making him lead do that, which generates that 90 from this guy's track. Not drawing that very well, sorry guys. There's the right angle. So 2's coming down here. Meanwhile, lead's picking her off this way. He calls off, in place, close enough to being in battle. And then you carry on with the route. If you haven't thought about it, I guarantee this guy will go through the target and go, right, I'm off on the route, I'll go this way, and this guy's back here, and it's just a shambles. This is just as important as the other stuff as the route.
DM, a quick one.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you're doing this, do you plan it as a flight, or is this just the lead who plans it and then briefs it?
You would plan it as, in the real world, you plan it as a flight. In training, where I was training the guys to do it, you get him to plan it because you want him to do it. But yeah, you plan it as a flight.
Obviously, it's not complicated when you're flying it, but you know what I mean. I think if you're planning the mission and you all plan it together, then you understand the plan. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why that's how it would be. Yeah.
And I think with the facilities we've got with Discord and with like combat flight, I think it'd be really nice for us to do more of that in the future. I'd quite like to get involved with
I definitely think that would be a good way forward there.
Yeah,
Everyone's got understanding of what's the plan and how we're going to do it, instead of just having not the briefing cribs are the briefing cubes, but obviously if you don't know the overall plan as such, then briefing cubes can be quite, it's like, right, what the fuck am I doing at this point, blah blah blah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's worth doing. I mean, I especially Discord with this video sort of facility that we've got now as well with combat flight, someone drawing it up and doing it. That's how it would be for real. So you work it out, you tell the guy where it's going to be, and then when it comes to the brief, all you're doing is reinforcing and confirming rather than telling. But yeah, that's how it would be for real. When we train, we'd get the student leader to plan it and brief it, and we would see what was happening. You pick up, you say, right, he's doing this, okay, and those things, I understand. Is that what he's going to brief me? Yeah, he briefed me that, which is obviously different to doing it as a team, but because we're assessing him. But yes, that's what you do. Yeah.
And that goes very much back to your nav training session, where it's worth reading ahead and looking at the route and knowing the landmarks and what the turn's going to be. So the whole flight has an idea of what's coming rather than following the leader.
And I'll tell you now, guys, that was the thing that used to get the guys through the course. The guys who could get through the course weren't the best stick and rudder guys, because everyone is the same standard of pilot. You know, once you've had enough practice at doing anything, it was the guys that could think about those things, the guys that had it already in their head, right, ahead of me now is I'm going to be turning here, I'm going to do this, but there's some shite weather here. What am I going to do with my formation? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We'll miss the target. We'll just tell them, right, off target due weather. And we wouldn't care if you missed the target. If you said, right, we're avoiding weather now, or if I could see him avoiding weather, I'd go, yeah, mate, that's a great pass. That's good. Well done. Yeah. You didn't flies into the weather because you didn't see it till the last freaking second. Even though you hit the target, you all crashed into a mountain. Yeah, that's bollocks. So it's all about the guys that did really well were the guys that could think ahead. And where you sit, you know it's going to come to a juddering end, like a crossbow bolt hitting a door in a medieval film or something. It goes because that's the end of their thinking. They get the target relief, and then they're in the weather. Shit.
Yeah.
And it's the whole picture. It's everything. It's having that spare capacity. And the secret to that is keeping it really simple. Don't get bunched up about stuff. And so when I teach the formation flying that I'm doing with the guys on the new guys that are coming in, that's why we're in the A4: heading and speed and fly battle, and job's done.
Yeah.
After that, we'll add navigation, we'll add other layers. But if you get that bit squared away, then it's your head out the cockpit, and situational awareness is massive.
Cool.
That's it, guys. Anything else?
Thank you, Danger.
That was an hour and a half, more than I expected. Sorry.
That's great. Thanks very much.
No, it's better than an hour and a half. When we get a nice, good session, good hour and a half session, then you have to then do this again.
Yeah, the thing is, you guys could sneak off for more beer. I couldn't. You see,
I can't. I got to go. I had to go up to the kitchen to get beer.
Fair enough, fellas. That's it. I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to fly with some of the new guys on the route tomorrow. We're just going to go and mince around and put this all into practice. We all make mistakes when we do it. When you do stuff like this and you make a mistake, we're our own worst critics. You guys all fly really well, and that's the only reason. There's a whole bunch of us, I'm sure, that just stay in this group. So it's great stuff, guys. I like the way that it all works and nobody takes themselves too seriously, which is really cool.
Hey, DM, by the way, just as a heads up, in case you ever run out of things to do career-wise, you make a great hand model.
I think his big fucking head gets in the way, but
I'm just embarrassed he still got her at his age.
Yeah,
it's a bit dark. It's a bit dark in here. Yeah,
I was really good at that, mate. Really good.
I I didn't knock over too much of it with my head, did I? You did get to see it, did you?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it's all great.
Yeah.
getting the piss out of me.
Yeah, cool. And I keep knocking it as well. Look, that's
Have to say, I'm a year behind DM, and I've got more hair than he has.
Hope for you both.
Nice one.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you so
fellas.
much.
I'm out of here. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Benji.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Cheers, mate.
Yeah,
Take
no,
care.
yeah,
Thank
Well,
you.
listen, bit of trivia. If you want football results,